Another day, another video on the build of the Pink Panther. So today we are going to do some designing for the front suspension. All right, so when designing this front, I don't know what you call it, a subframe. I guess it's gonna be some kind of a, I don't know, some kind of a something. It's gonna involve a little CAD design. CAD stands for Cardboard Aided Design. So I will be cutting and taping and drilling cardboard into the shape of the structure that I need to hold my shocks in place. And the angle of the shocks affects how much effectiveness the springs have. So I'm gonna put a couple of different adjustments in there in case I wanna slightly stiffen or slightly soften the spring rate of the springs. So, all right, that's what I'm gonna do. Follow along. Another day and we're back in the shop. So if you remember from my rear end is droopy video, my shocks, as the car went through its normal travel, eventually the springs would come away from the spring perch. And there's a reason for that, which I'll explain later. But the way to deal with that, well, I'll just in case you forget, I'll show you, I'll remind you. Okay, so I'm gonna jack up the side of the car. And you can see that the spring is already coming away from the perch. So I know that some people are gonna say, oh, why don't you just turn these down until it meets the spring? Okay, well, here's the problem with that. If I turn this all the way down and it were to meet the spring and be tight, when I let the car down, the shock would be at the end of its travel, okay? So it would have no droop at all. Now, the reason it has no droop, well, it has a tiny bit of droop, if I do that, is that this spring, it's a 550 pound spring, and I ordered the wrong spring. It wasn't necessarily the wrong spring, it's that the car, I had the suspension set up way too stiff. So, I mean, I drove it in 2016, I drove it with 500 pound per inch springs in it. And then I had the problem with the droop and the tires spin. So I thought maybe if I stiffened up the whole suspension, it wouldn't do that as much. So I put in 650-pound springs in it, and it was better, but the car is too stiff. So I'm going to be getting rid of the 550-pound springs. These are going to go away, and I'm putting in 400-pound springs. Now, when I put the 400-pound springs in there, maybe when I put the car down, it's going to drop enough or compress enough on the springs that I will have good droop, you know, when the car goes through its motions, without needing either this tender spring. This is a tender spring. I don't know if it's called a tender spring because it's really easy and tender, but anyways, or this helper spring. This is a 200-pound per inch helper spring. But I ordered these before I knew that I needed 400-pound springs in the back of the car. So I'm going to just try them now. We're going to install them, and we're going to see what happens. See if these, like how well these will take up the, you know, that play in the springs there. Okay? Okay, so the next part is really easy. I just have to take off this thing that holds the spring in place. Rid of those. And let's see. This goes. You know what? I'm going to try the helper spring first. See how that works. So that's the helper spring. Then this little slider goes in here, and this keeps everything all aligned properly. Oh, I see we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. If I adjust this all the way. Maybe I can get it on there then. That one. That one. Oh, my homemade spring compressor doesn't work. It's meant for the smaller springs of those bike shocks. Okay, well, that did not work. So, I need a spring compressor for that, so that's not going to work. Let's try the tender springs. Let's see if that is going to work. There we go. That was easy. All right, let's put this back in the car and see what happens. Okay, it seems to have worked. So we're going to take a look at it, and well, we're going to jack up the side of the car and see if I can go full droop and it still be, you know, properly on there. But here you can see them, the tender springs, almost completely squished when sitting at normal ride height at rest. Well, maybe a little higher ride height than normal. As a matter of fact, let's take a look at that now. Where's my measuring tape? Ride height in the back of the car is normally like 3 inches. And now it's sitting at 3.5 inches. That 3 inches is actually going to get dropped for competition this year. I'm going to be dropping it down to like 2.5 inches or 2.25 inches because the geometry of the rear suspension is better at that lower ride height. Plus, it also has a better center of gravity at the lower ride height. So we're going to be running it lower than normal. But anyways, okay. Well, that is higher than it was. So I'm going to lower the car by turning on these back down to the ride height that it's supposed to be. Okay. It's still a little on the high side. But see, that can also be adjusted with the lower shock mount. Down there, the lower shock mount there's different adjustments for it. So I can also just, you know, change that whole lower mount to get the ride height I want. But for right now, we can still check to see if that is going to, if the spring is going to come away from the perch when we jack up the car. All right, so I am going to jack up the side of the car now, and we're going to see what's going to happen. Let's see if I can get a little better, little light on that. Shed some light on the situation. Okay. Okay, the tire just came off the ground there, and yeah, this is all still looking good. So okay, well, I think those are going to work, but like I say, I am going to 400-pound springs in the car, which is going to change everything. So this is just an interesting exercise. It's not the way the car is going to finally be. But anyways, well, more work to do on the car, and I'm going to get right to it.